The sheer, unadulterated predictability of the Sussex PR machine would be laughable if it were not so desperately transparent. Just as the whispers of marital fracture and financial ruin reached a deafening crescendo in the tabloids, we are suddenly and quite miraculously treated to a barrage of spontaneous, Joya-calculated visual assault designed to tell us, the plebeians, that all is well in the Montecito paradise. Good evening, and thank you for joining me for this discussion. It is a tactic as old as celebrity itself, though I dare say few have wielded it with such clumsy enthusiasm as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. If you have been following the news cycle over the last 48 hours, specifically the events of this past weekend, February 15th and 16th, you will have noticed a distinct shift in the wind. The silence has been broken, not by the dignified work of charitable endeavor, but by the flashbulbs of the paparazzi they claim to loathe, and the meticulously curated release of private family imagery. One does not need to be a seasoned royal correspondent to understand that when the walls start closing in, Harry and Meghan start smiling for the cameras. Let us begin with the most cynical deployment of all, the children. For years, we have been told that the privacy of Archie and Lilibet is paramount, a sacred boundary that the wicked British press must never cross. We have been lectured, sued, and moralized at regarding the sanctity of their childhood. We are constantly reminded that they are private citizens, not public property. And yet, precisely when the narrative turns against their parents, the veil is lifted. Just as the media began to run with stories of separate lives and business failures, a photo of young Lilibet magically appears in the public domain. A well-placed source in the media landscape suggests this was no accidental leak, but a strategic drop. The image, released under the guise of a Valentine's sentiment, shows Prince Harry holding his daughter, who is clutching red balloons. Now, any child is a delight, and one wishes the little girl nothing but happiness. But we must look at the machinery behind the image. Why now? Why, after months of shielding her face, do we suddenly get this clearest look yet? It is a distraction, plain and simple. It is a human shield made of innocence, deployed to soften the blow of the incoming critical artillery. Observers in the media landscape have noted that the timing is impeccable. You see, nothing generates positive headlines quite like a royal child. It tugs at the heartstrings. It reminds the public of Harry's role as a father, arguably the only role he currently plays that hasn't been tarnished by scandal. A source within the inner circle has hinted that the decision to release the image was driven entirely by a need to generate positive engagement on social media, to drown out the less savory headlines regarding their staff departures and the questions surrounding their finances. It is the commodification of fatherhood, used to remind the American public that Harry is still the fun dad, the relatable prince, rather than the litigious exile he has become. But a photo, no matter how charming, was evidently deemed insufficient to quell the rumors. They needed to be seen, and they needed to be seen winning. And so, we moved to the spectacle of Sunday, February 15th at the NBA All-Star Game in Inglewood. The irony of their presence there is rich enough to cause gout. Here are two individuals who fled the United Kingdom, citing the unbearable intrusion of the press, claiming they wanted a quiet life away from the fishbowl. Yet where do they choose to spend their Sunday evening? At one of the most televised, high-profile sporting events in the American calendar, sitting courtside, practically on the playing surface. This is not a couple hiding from the spotlight. This is a couple bathing in it. Observers present at the arena noted that the performance began the moment they stepped out of the vehicle. The body language was fascinating to behold. We saw a duchess dressed in a navy blazer, business casual, yet severe, clinging to the arm of a duke who at times looked as though he were trying to remember his lines. They laughed, they whispered, they pointed at the game with exaggerated animation. It was a masterclass in performative unity. A well-meaning staff member has suggested in the past that Meghan is acutely aware of the camera angles at all times, and this outing was no exception. Every touch, every glance seemed calibrated for the long lenses they knew were trained upon them. They were seated near Queen Latifah, attempting to project an image of effortless integration into the Hollywood elite. But one cannot help but notice the strain. The A-list embrace they so desperately crave has been lukewarm at best, and this appearance felt like a forceful reminder to the industry. We are still here. We are still relevant. But are they? Or are they merely filling seats that would otherwise go to stars with current box office hits? The most galling aspect of this Valentine's weekend offensive is the sheer hypocrisy of it all. You cannot demand privacy with one hand and wave to the cameras with the other. You cannot sue newspapers for photographing you on a balcony and then sit courtside at an NBA game, knowing full well that your face will be beamed to millions of screens globally. It insults our intelligence. It suggests that they believe privacy is not a right to a quiet life, but a right to control the narrative absolutely. They want the press, but only when the press is singing their praises. They want the cameras, but only when the lighting is flattering and the questions are unasked. Furthermore, this sudden visibility betrays a deep anxiety. A confident couple, secure in their standing and their marriage, does not need to prove it to the world on a basketball court. The late Queen and Prince Philip did not need to make public displays of affection to prove their partnership. Their duty spoke for itself. William and Catherine do not need to stage date nights to convince us they are a team. Their work is the evidence. But for Harry and Meghan, the brand is the relationship. If the marriage is seen to be failing, the brand collapses. Without the greatest love story ever told, what are they? A retired actress and a spare prince with a diminishing inheritance. A source behind closed doors has whispered that this blitz was Meghan's doing, a direct response to the separate lives narrative that has been gaining traction. She knows that in the court of public opinion, visibility is viability. If they disappear, the rumors fester. So they must be seen. They must smile. They must wave, even if the laughter doesn't quite reach their eyes, and the hand-holding looks more like a grip for balance than a gesture of affection. But what were they trying to distract us from? Why the sudden need to flood the zone with happy families and basketball dates? As is often the case with the Sussexes, the shiny object is being waved in your face to stop you from looking at the mess in the corner. Because while they were grinning for the cameras in Inglewood, stories were breaking that paint a very different picture of life behind the high walls of Montecito. Stories of staff locking out, of furious rows, and of a past that refuses to stay buried. The facade is polished, yes. The photos are high resolution. The seats were expensive. But as we peel back the layers in the next part of this discussion, we will see that no amount of courtside giggling can mask the fundamental fractures appearing in the foundation of their Californian dream. The Valentine's narrative was a sweet confection, but the reality, I'm afraid, is far more bitter. While the flashbulbs at the basketball game were blinding, they could not illuminate the darker corners of the narrative that has been quietly unfolding behind the scenes. If the public display was the theater, then what happened just 24 hours prior was the unscripted reality, a reality that is far more chaotic and frankly bizarre than any carefully curated Instagram post would have you believe. We must turn our attention to the evening of February 14th itself. One would expect a couple of their status royalty after all, or so they insist on reminding us, to choose a venue for Valentine's Day that screams elegance, discretion, and perhaps a touch of romantic seclusion. Instead, the whispers circulating through the City of Angels suggest a choice that is baffling to the point of suspicion. A source behind closed doors in the Los Angeles hospitality scene has indicated that their chosen locale was not the sanctuary of high society one might anticipate, but a venue with a rather colorful reputation. Now, I shall not be so crude as to repeat the most salacious epithets used by the locals. Phrases like cocaine den have been bandied about on social media with reckless abandon. But where there is smoke, there is usually a fire of poor judgment. Why would the Duke and Duchess, so obsessed with security and their pristine image, drag their detail to a place known more for its debauchery than its dining? It reeks of a setup. It suggests a deliberate attempt to place themselves in a chaotic environment, perhaps to later claim they were hounded or unsafe, or simply to generate the kind of edgy rock and roll press they seem to think makes them look relevant to a younger demographic. It was a sordid little outing that felt entirely off-brand for a couple trying to market themselves as global humanitarians. It was messy, and messy is not a word that sits well with the title of Duchess. This bizarre dinner date brings us neatly to the elephant in the room, the subject that no amount of courtside hand-holding can suppress, the persistent, deafening roar of separate lives. For months now, we have watched the so-called solopreneur strategy unfold. We saw Harry traveling alone to the Far East, Meghan walking red carpets solo, the distinct separation of their professional identities. We were told this was a strategic pivot, a way for each to shine. But a well-placed source within the Montecito household suggests that this professional divergence was merely a symptom of a much deeper personal fissure. The strategy has failed, spectacularly. Harry without Meghan looks lost. Meghan without Harry looks like just another reality TV star trying to climb the ladder. The power couple branding was the only thing that made them unique, and in trying to dismantle it, they have exposed the weakness of their individual foundations. The insiders are talking, and they are saying that the togetherness we saw this weekend was a panic response. It was damage control. The narrative of them living virtually separate existences, Harry reportedly spending time in hotels or guest houses to escape the tension, had become too loud to ignore. The marriage, according to these whispers, has become a business arrangement, a partnership bound by contracts and shared debt rather than affection. They are staying together because, quite frankly, they cannot afford to be apart. The brand is worthless if it is halved. And who is to blame for this collapse of the Sussex empire? Well, if the reports are to be believed, the finger-pointing has begun in earnest, and it is pointing squarely at the prince. A well-meaning former staff member has leaked details of what can only be described as a meltdown within the walls of their estate. We are hearing of a duchess who is allegedly furious, terrified, and looking for a scapegoat. The departure of key personnel, the revolving door of staff that has become a hallmark of their operation, is not just bad luck. It is a symptom of a toxic environment. We have heard the term dictator duchess before, and it seems to have returned with a vengeance. But this time, the ire is not just directed at the assistants and the PR team. It is directed at Harry. The word from the inner sanctum is that Meghan blames Harry for the failure of their brand. She reportedly feels that his baggage, his family feuds, his court cases, his obsession with the past, is dragging her down. She is the star in her own mind, and he is the anchor. There are rumors of strict demands being issued, ultimatums given to Harry to fix the situation or face the consequences. She allegedly wants him to distance himself even further from his family scandals, specifically the murmurs surrounding his uncle, to protect her reputation. It is a staggering display of narcissism, is it not? To marry a prince and then blame his princedom for your lack of popularity. The tension is palpable. You can see it in the eyes of the staff who leave, one by one, abandoning the Arkwell ship before it sinks completely. You can hear it in the silence of their former Hollywood friends, who have slowly, quietly distanced themselves, and you can sense it in the frantic nature of their PR. Happy couples do not need to issue press releases about how happy they are. Secure partners do not need to stage photo ops to prove they still live together. The separate lives narrative is not going away because it rings true. We see a duke who misses his home, his friends, his culture, and perhaps even his duty. And we see a duchess who is realizing that the title alone is not enough to conquer America. She needs the adulation, and she is not getting it. And when a narcissist is denied their supply of adoration, the result is rage. So, while they may smile for the cameras at the NBA, sitting shoulder to shoulder, the reality described by those who know them best is one of distance. Emotional distance, physical distance, and a growing realization that the freedom they sought has become a cage of their own making. But if you think the domestic troubles and the PR disasters are the worst of it, you would be mistaken. Because lurking in the background are threats far more dangerous than a failed brand or a cold marriage. There are ghosts from the past, legal lists, and a deep-seated jealousy that threatens to consume them entirely. In the final part of our discussion, we will delve into the truly dark clouds gathering over Montecito, the scandals they cannot smile their way out of. If the domestic strife and the frantic PR maneuvering were not enough to dampen the spirits in Montecito, there is a far darker, more ominous storm gathering on the horizon. We have discussed the facade of the happy marriage and the strategic deployment of their children, but now we must confront the issues that truly keep them awake at night. These are not merely matters of bad press. These are matters of reputation, legal peril, and a jealousy so deep-seated it seems to have consumed the Duke entirely. Let us address the specter that has been haunting the corridors of power for years, and which is now, according to persistent whispers circulating in legal and diplomatic corridors, begun to drift uncomfortably close to the Duchess herself. We are, of course, talking about the Epstein saga. For weeks, the Internet has been ablaze with speculation regarding the release of new documents and lists associated with the disgraced financier. And while the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, has rightfully borne the brunt of public scrutiny for his appalling associations, a new narrative is emerging from the shadows. There are murmurs, quiet, insistent, and growing in volume, that questions are being asked about Meghan's own past connections. We are hearing reports of a certain unease regarding her time in social circles that may have overlapped with figures we would rather not mention in polite society. Now, consider the breathtaking hypocrisy at play here. We are told by sources close to the couple that Meghan has issued strict warnings to Harry to stay away from his uncle, to distance the Sussex brand from the toxic fallout of the York scandal. She is reportedly terrified that the contagion will spread to her carefully curated empire. But if the whispers from legal circles are to be believed, she may well be projecting her own anxieties. It is a classic deflection tactic. Point the finger at the easy target, the disgraced Prince Andrew, while hoping no one looks too closely at your own diary from 15 years ago. The audacity of it is staggering. Here is a woman who entered the royal family with a history, a past, and a network of connections that were never fully vetted by the public. And now, as the rhetoric heats up, she is allegedly positioning herself as the moral arbiter, telling Harry who he can and cannot speak to. It creates a dynamic of paranoia. If she is indeed warning him, is it out of protection for him or protection for herself? Is she afraid of what an association with the Yorks might reveal about her own navigation of high society before she met her prince? The silence from their camp on this specific issue is, as they say, deafening. But if fear is the driving force behind the Epstein rumors, then pure, unadulterated envy is the engine driving the next scandal. A long-time family acquaintance has provided insight into a new biography that is currently causing tremors in London. The book, which dissects the breakdown of the relationship between the brothers, claims that Harry was, and remains, absolutely furious about the issue of security. Specifically, the disparity between the protection afforded to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, when she was merely William's girlfriend, and the protection given to Meghan. According to this source, Harry has harbored a bitter grudge for years, convinced that the palace bent the rules for Catherine while leaving Meghan to the wolves. He reportedly views this not as a matter of protocol. Catherine was, after all, dating the future king, but as a personal slight, a deliberate act of malice. And yes, he has even thrown around the word racism in private outbursts to explain the difference. This is the tragedy of Prince Harry in a nutshell. He is a man obsessed with the past, picking at old scabs until they bleed, unable to understand that hierarchy is the very essence of the institution he was born into. He cannot grasp that the wife of the heir and the wife of the spare are not, and never will be, on equal footing. To him, it is all a conspiracy. To the rest of us, it is constitutional reality. This jealousy of Catherine, of her popularity, her dignity, and her unassailable position is the poison in the Sussex chalice. Meghan, we are told, feeds this grievance. She reinforces the narrative that they are victims, that Catherine is the villain who stole their limelight and their security. It is a toxic feedback loop. They sit in their Montecito mansion, stewing over security arrangements from nearly a decade ago, while the world moves on. It is pathetic, really. It shows a couple who are not looking forward to the future, but are perpetually looking back in anger, keeping score in a game they have already lost. So, where does this leave them? What is the end game for Harry and Meghan as we move deeper into 2026? The picture painted by financial experts and brand analysts is bleak. The separate lives we discussed earlier are likely to continue. But a full divorce? That is a complicated matter. You see, they are trapped. They are bound together not by love, but by necessity. The Sussex brand is a house of cards built on the concept of their unity. Apart, their value plummets. Harry without Meghan is a sad, isolated figure with no career prospects. Meghan without Harry is simply a former cable actress with a title she can no longer use effectively. They need each other to sustain the lifestyle to which they have become addicted. The private jets, the security teams, the designer wardrobes, none of it is sustainable on a solo income. We are witnessing a gold digger's dilemma. She may have sought the prince and the fortune, but she has found herself with a prince who is cut off from the bank and a fortune that is rapidly dwindling due to exorbitant spending and failed business ventures. They are locked in a golden cage, forced to perform the role of the happy couple at basketball games and in Valentine's photos because the alternative is financial oblivion. They will continue to launch rebrands. They will continue to blame the press. They will continue to issue moral lectures while living lives of spectacular indulgence. But the cracks in the foundation are now too wide to ignore. The staff are leaving, the friends are disappearing, the family is estranged, and the rumors, the dark, damaging rumors about their pasts and their marriage are getting louder. The smile may be fixed on their faces, but the eyes tell a different story. It is the look of two people who know the game is up, but who have no choice but to keep playing. Thank you for watching. As always, we will keep a very close watch on the developments from California. Do not be fooled by the balloons and the basketballs. The real story is always what they are trying to hide.